stance on climate change.
My own personal journey on the issue of the climate crisis began here in Cambridge 42 years ago when I walked into the classroom of Roger Revelle, and he was a genius and a great man, a distinguished scientist. He was the first to propose the epic long-running 50-year plus measurement of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere, one of the most important scientific undertakings in the history of human civilization. And during his course, he opened my eyes to what this was all about and opened a window onto the future through which it was possible to see what would unfold if we did not take action to halt the rapidly accumulating global warming pollution in the Earth's atmosphere. So it is a homecoming for me each time I come back to this city. I want to acknowledge here in Massachusetts the outstanding leadership of Ed Markey and John Kerry. Ed, along with his colleague Henry Waxman, did a terrific job in a very difficult political environment in the House of Representatives to get legislation that, while containing provisions that many of us would not have wanted to see, and Ed didn't either, nevertheless walked the line between what was possible politically and what is necessary to respond to the crisis. And John Kerry has been the preeminent leader in the United States Senate in pulling together the various groups and factions to get legislation there. And that effort is proceeding. Barbara Boxer, his colleague, just reported out of the Environment Committee this week one of the 6 pieces of legislation that will all be combined together in a consensus draft due to be available before Copenhagen and designed to attract the votes of 60 senators, a sufficient number to pass the legislation in the aftermath of Copenhagen. I was on the phone this morning with the Prime Minister of Denmark. He gave an update of the preparations there, and I think that in spite of the odds and in spite of the pessimism, there is an excellent chance of a binding political agreement among heads of state in Copenhagen that will both begin immediate implementation of reductions and give a roadmap to the negotiators who will be assigned to complete the details of a comprehensive treaty in the months following Copenhagen. We're putting 90 million tons of CO2 into the thin shell atmosphere surrounding our planet every 24 hours. And more than 25 million of those tons every day go into the oceans. They become carbonic acid that is now present in such amounts that evenly distributed pretty much that it has actually changed the acidity level of the oceans. Overall, the pattern that has been clear to scientists like Jim and others who lived with this for such a long time is by now a familiar pattern. The IPCC typically projects different scenarios of where the crisis is going, low, medium, high, and then a few years later they go back and examine the evidence, and in almost every case, the actual impacts turn out to be right at or even above the worst case projection that had been compiled only a few years prior to that. What it all comes down to are 6 molecules, and the 6 gases, one of them is technically not a gas, but the 6 gases that cause the climate crisis. And of course, CO2 is the principal one, by far the largest part of the cause. But recent scientific advances have taken into account the complicated interaction of these 6 kinds of molecules in the atmosphere and with other chemicals and with aerosols. And that results in a recalibration of the relative importance of each of the 6. We face what you could call a carbon crisis because the climate crisis is connected to the security crisis. We have had several wars in the Middle East, all of them with complicated causes, but one enduring cause for our involvement in that region is the very real fact that America's national security is at risk when global oil markets are so vulnerable to sudden and drastic disruption. The energy security crisis has to be addressed not just in the moment of high oil prices, but during the times when prices come back down. And we've followed a pattern that President Barack Obama described, I think, better than I've heard it elsewhere. We go from shock to trance. When the prices go up, we're in a state of shock, and they come back down, and we fall back into a kind of trance state, if you will. And it's important for us as Americans to understand that the nature of the world oil market is not just an oligopoly. It is partly a free market. It's a hybrid. But when supply and demand are in sufficient balance to allow the manipulation of supply and therefore price, it can be done by the sovereign states in the Middle East that own the largest reserves of oil and have the ability to go up or down in their daily production rate and have a very profound impact on the global price. And we've wrongly assumed that they followed one strategic objective, and that is to maximize their price at maximize their revenue at any given time. And of course they do, but they think strategically. And that has led them to pursue 2 goals, not one. They want to get the maximum revenue, but when they sense the formation of political will sufficient to develop alternatives to foreign oil, then they will bring the price back down and disrupt the forward planning of governments and businesses who have mobilized during their time of shock to develop renewables and to develop substitutes for foreign oil. We've got everything we need, with the potential exception of sufficient political will. But as our country and as this community has demonstrated over and over again, in the United States of America, political will is a renewable resource.
Nobel Peace Prize winner Al Gore says the main obstacle in the climate crisis is lack of political will, but hopes for change through the UN Climate Conference in Copenhagen. For WEBN, I'm Brandon Penny.